I didn't even like Charlie Kirk. So why am I so sad, so affected by his murder? Welcome to Cylinder Radio. I'm Will Roosh, educator in Los Angeles that's really committed my whole career to bringing viewpoint diversity and critical thinking to the education space and also in the culture wars online. I'm recording this on a Wednesday. It's been a week since Charlie Kirk has been killed, and I was kind of taking notes on my phone to record this podcast. Amir Odom, who's an acquaintance of mine who has a really awesome channel on YouTube, he did a phenomenal job kind of breaking down his take on Charlie Kirk and everything. And it's interesting because he opens it up by saying, if someone sends this to you, maybe listen to it, because he knew Charlie Kirk. He's a black, gay conservative, kind of center right. And I sent it to a friend of mine who is a straight white man, blonde hair, blue eyed artist. He's a very left leaning, let's say progressive, woke, I guess, guy, and a good friend of mine, really sweet-hearted person, soft-hearted person. And I sent it to him, and he said he listened to 2 minutes and he had to shut it off. And he said, "Let me ask you something, Will." He said, "Would Charlie Kirk be okay with Amir Odom getting married?" I was like, "No, probably not." And Amir actually addresses that. He's like, "Well, then I can't listen to it." So you can't listen to it. Interesting. Because you won't listen to someone that's not in lockstep with every single governmental policy that you align with, because he associates certain policies with morality. So I think it's very telling. There's a lot about empathy here. James Lindsay said the reason why he doesn't like woke, for lack of a better term, pejorative term, wokeness, critical social justice stuff, is he said it takes really soft-hearted people and it turns them into something very ugly and angry and evil. And I'm not saying my friend's evil, he's a good friend of mine, but there is something to this element of it turns people who intend to do well, but it's the flip side of empathy. Empathy is it's what leads the mother bear to maul you. If you look left and there's cubs and you look right and there's a mother bear, you're done for, because it's in us biologically to protect the vulnerable. So we feel what the vulnerable feel. And when you see marginalized people as vulnerable, you kind of see them as helpless. And then you mother bear them, which is why people who are all about love and acceptance and, all the critical social justice stuff, they can be so brutal because it's that mother bear thing. But also, there's elements here. If you aren't willing to hear someone out who disagrees with you on something like gay marriage or abortion, 42% of the American black population is against gay marriage. So you're not going to listen to half the black people in the country, you take these issues, the biggest dividing issues in this country, we're split darn close to 50-50 on all of these issues. So there has to be something to it, right? My feed is like my podcast. It's very, very diverse on social media. And there's a lot of black women saying that they love Charlie Kirk, and a lot of white men saying that they didn't, and saying that he was terrible and racist. And then and homophobic. And there's a lot of gay black women who say that they loved him and he wasn't those things at all. Doesn't that cause some sort of pause and curiosity that they could see it so differently than you? But people aren't curious. They're not, because you don't want to get revealed to be wrong. It feels bad to be wrong. It feels bad to see that your heart is such in the right place. You want to help these people and you realize that you might be hurting them. I have a friend who's an NP, a nurse practitioner, and she's talking about a lot of stuff with COVID. And she was like, it's really hard for them to come to terms with the fact that they might have done some damage, because you've committed your whole life to helping people that maybe you're hurting them, and if you commit your whole life to being a social justice warrior and you realize that maybe you're acting in a way that silences certain black voices or gay voices or whatever it is, you don't want to confront that. I understand. So I didn't really even like Charlie Kirk, but when he died, I heard he was shot, and I was like, well, people are getting shot now. So that's like a thing. Trump was shot. I didn't know. And then I saw the video, and I wish I wouldn't have. It's like talk about trigger warning, right? I was like, oh, he's dead. And it turned out he was shot with a 30-06, which is the rifle that I use for elk hunting. As soon as you saw it, that he was gone. And when this is probably the biggest celebrity death that's affected me. It's like, why? Well, before that, it wasn't necessarily famous people. It was like Greg Giraldo or Norm Macdonald. These are stand-up comedians. And when they died, what happened was I go, oh man, we're never going to get an original Greg Giraldo or Norm Macdonald, like an original thought. Those thoughts are gone. I valued Charlie Kirk because I consumed hundreds of hours of his stuff because I disagreed with him and on a lot of things, not everything, a lot of things. And I wanted to sharpen my ideas. He was so valuable. He's very valuable. The Ben Shapiros out there are super valuable to people on the left. Not even to people on the right, because it's just going to solidify your ideas even more. But the people on the left, like iron sharpens iron. That's the resistance that's so important to critical thinking. Why didn't I like Charlie Kirk? Okay. Or why didn't I, didn't I agree with him on? Well, I didn't agree with him on drugs, his stance on drugs. He wanted to make cannabis illegal. Keep alcohol legal. He wasn't a drinker or a smoker, but if you want alcohol to be legal and cannabis illegal, that's a tough sell for me. I don't think data necessarily supports it, but he had data because he's a Charlie Kirk guy. He's like a very logical guy. His stance on death penalty, he was pro death penalty. I think as a Jesus person, which Charlie was, a Jesus person, he was a Christian. I'm a Jesus person. I think that when you go through capital punishment, I think there's a missed opportunity for repentance. So I'm against the death penalty. But more than that, I disagreed with his approach. He is a facts guy. He's facts. He's all left brain. Fact. And in that, I think that sometimes what happens is you're so focused on the facts and the facts don't care about your feeling stuff that you ignore the reality that there's more to it than just facts. There are. And there's context to those facts. Statistics. You threw a lot of statistics around, and, statistics can be manipulated in so many different ways. Who took that statistic really? Like, what was the intention of the people taking that poll? Like these are questions that are really important, but he was so smart. He would just kind of rattle these things off. In Christianity, we're called to, display and show others grace and truth. Those are two pillars, grace and truth. And I think Charlie was high on the truth and not enough in the grace. Because I've heard him say society in Christian society is so heavy on the grace, not enough truth. So he's bringing more of the truth side. I think that people who are Jesus followers, if they're on the more political left, they lean more into the scripture on grace. And if you're more on the political right, you lean more into the scripture on truth. And there's a spectrum there. Where do you fall? Grace and truth, grace and truth. And the Christian church is very divided because people are walking out of church because the pastor might have said something like, let's pray for Charlie Kirk's family. And they're like, how dare you? He's a racist, sexist, homophobe. And then people walked out of church because they didn't give enough. They didn't say Charlie Kirk's name, or they didn't give enough attention to Charlie Kirk. And you lost a Christian brother. That's a tough spot for pastors to be in. But it comes down to where do you fall on this grace truth line? I think he was harsh. I really do. And part of that is the fact that he was young. I think he was becoming actually more gracious, less harsh in his older age. He's 31 though. So he started doing this when he was 17 or 18. So his prefrontal cortex, his brain wasn't even developed. When your prefrontal cortex isn't fully developed, you don't think about long-term repercussions. So there was stuff that he said years and years ago that was ugly or sloppy because he was a kid. And when you have tens of thousands of hours of content out there and you want to pick stuff out that makes you look bad, you absolutely can. The best gift that was ever given by a student was, I had these three boys who sat in the back of my civics class. They were seniors. And all year long, I'd just see them rewriting stuff down. I didn't know what it was. I didn't give it much thought. And the last day of school, they gave me this little pamphlet. I said, Mr. Roosh, out of context, a journey. And it was all the things that I said throughout the year that were out of context, that were taken out of context. And it was bad. It was bad because I'm a dancing monkey up there. I just want to, I got to keep them entertained. entertainment, information, keep their attention. It's hard with the kids nowadays. And there's so many things that I would say. I'd be like quoting something or acting something out, and it looked really bad just on paper. So context matters. Probably the worst one in this pamphlet I'm going to share with you is the quote is, out of context, is, "My experiences with naked boys has been largely positive." Now, out of context, I should be fired. I should be nowhere near kids. That's like what a predator would say. That's horrific. What is the context? How could there possibly be a context to that? Well, the context is, I was telling a story about how I was in Poland visiting all of the sites of the Holocaust. And on the bus, we were watching a movie called Escape from Sobibor, which is a movie about the Holocaust. And there's a scene in this movie where there's a bunch of people lined up to go into the gas chamber. They're naked, because that's how they go into the gas chamber. And there's a little boy, maybe 4 or 5 years old, who just runs out of the line, just starts running across a field. And the SS soldiers take a German Shepherd, and they unleash the German Shepherd. The German Shepherd just is running down the kid. The kid's running, and the German Shepherd's running, and then the German Shepherd just runs him down. And I just started bawling. It affected me deeply. Why that scene? All these horrible scenes in this movie. It's because the only time I've ever seen naked boys are my own. When they're leaving the bathtub to go to their room or get changed. And they're little. And it's this time that's so precious in my life when they are innocent. They're shame-free. They're like early in the Garden of Eden, like, who told you were naked? It's so innocent and pure. And to watch that scene, it just it crushed me, because I'm not a creep. And all of my experiences with that have been my own kids in this privacy of our home in such a beautiful way. So that context matters. Context matters, and not everything he said was a context issue. Probably my biggest issue, other than his approach, would be in August of 2020. Charlie Kirk tweeted, "The only way a ticket as uninspiring, corrupt, and anti-American as Joe Biden and Kamala Harris can beat President Trump is with widespread voter fraud." I think that's months before the election. I think Charlie really stoked the flames of this idea of voter fraud. And when the riots happened at the Capitol, he didn't take ownership. I'm a Jocko Willink guy. I think that you need to take ownership. And he didn't take any ownership that he might have pushed these very impressionable people into doing something that was very destructive and bad. And I took issue with that. I did, and I want to be real about this, because I can be deeply affected and not paint this as, I was a big Charlie Kirk fan. He was wonderful and I loved everything about him. That wasn't my experience. I valued him, but I didn't like him, if that makes sense. When I was in the summer between 9th and 10th grade, a boy in our class, in my graduating class, but we were in 9th grade, committed suicide. Really, really tragic, really sad. And there was a girl that he was always asking out. He was in love with. And at his funeral, she got up and was the first one to talk about how wonderful he was and how they were best friends and she loved him so much. And we were just my buddies and I were just ugh, come on. I don't want to do that. I don't want to paint this as I really thought he was great and wonderful and, did everything, perfectly. That wasn't my experience. He was a flawed person, like we all are, which makes him human. But he was so set on just giving the facts and stuff that you can misconstrue that, especially without the context. Some of the things that he said, he would say things like the Civil Rights Act of 1964 was bad. Well, in the context, what was he talking about? He was talking about the idea of racial quotas that he was against. He was talking about the double standards and stuff. He's talking about voter ID. Now, voter ID is not a big issue for me personally, but I understand that it would be for Charlie Kirk. And voter ID laws, the absence of voter ID laws, I should say, is aligned with civil rights. It's a violation of civil rights. Kind of like the idea of like a poll tax. Also trans women in sports, which I think is an important issue in America, in the world right now. That happens under civil rights because of it's how you identify. So there was context to that stuff. You know, some of the things he said something about Ketanji Brown Jackson, Justice Jackson, Michelle Obama, Joy-Ann Reid, that they are DEI hires. Well, first of all, Joy-Ann Reid and Michelle Obama both said that they got into the schools that they did because of affirmative action. Like, by definition, that means it's like a DEI position. And then Ketanji Brown Jackson, she was nominated by Joe Biden. And Joe Biden said, I'm going to choose a black woman for this position. If you say that, you limit the pool from 100% of the population who are, qualified to what are black women in America? 6%? You go from 100% to 6%. So to say that the absolute best person for this position might not have been in that tiny 6% pool, not that she wasn't qualified, but was she the best? What are the chances that the best comes from that small 6%? That's what he was saying. It was just kind of sloppy. Same thing about like pilots. Like certain jobs are really important. And if you lower standards to meet a quota, then you will inherently get less qualified people. Not saying they aren't qualified, just less qualified than excellence, than the very, very top. Like a way to think about this that's like maybe less divisive would be pre-K teachers. Pre-K teachers, like nursery school teachers, are 98% female. So if you have 10 spots open, you want to fill it 50-50, men and women. You want more men in pre-K teaching. So I'm going to hire 5 men and 5 women. You might get 200 applicants that are female and 7 that are male. So just probability, you will get better teachers from the 200 pool than the 7 pool. Now you might get a Mr. Rogers type, right? Like you might get someone who's really, really good. But when you shrink the pool that you're pulling from, you will inherently get less qualified people. And maybe it doesn't matter as much in pre-K teaching, or maybe even like a judge, because maybe different perspectives are valuable. Immutable characteristics are valuable to bring different viewpoints. But certain things, it really matters. A lifeguard, you want to lower standards to get some sort of racial or diversity equity because a lifeguard, like that's not good for the person they're trying to save. That's not good for the person, the lifeguard themselves. And you look at the data, people who are brought into schools, like the numbers will be wrong here, but essentially, like if you're white, to get into Harvard, you need an SAT score of, let's say, 1350. If you're Asian, it's like 1450. If you're Hispanic, it's like 1250. If you're black, it's like 1150. So there are lower standards. And he was just pointing out that he doesn't like this idea of lower standards. Now, it could be misconstrued for sure, but was he a racist? Like, no, there's a Thomas Sowell quote that's very good. That is equality looks like injustice when you're used to preferential treatment. I watched the way Charlie Kirk talked to black people. He didn't talk to them any differently. And there's studies that have come out that shows that white liberals actually dumb down their language when talking to black people. They use smaller words. It's interesting. There's a Family Guy clip where there's it's like a cartoon where there's a woman sitting at a bar on her phone, and the bartender comes up and says, "You can't look at pornography in public, ma'am." And the woman goes, "Well, I'm transgender." And he goes, oh, I'm sorry, my mistake. Do anything you want all the time. Like, that's on the grace side, right? That's the grace of the left, is like this accepting thing of like different standards because of historical oppression or whatever it is. That is very present. I don't think Charlie Kirk did that. I think he actually held minorities to an equal standard. And it's that thing that Eric Weinstein says of like, if I can't critique you, then you aren't my equal. Like let's hold them to an equal standard. And why would a racist, initiate and have the Black Leadership Summit, about getting black leaders into prominent positions, which is something Charlie Kirk did. So if he was racist, it was a changing definition, or it was a very sloppy way of being racist, essentially. But there's a lot to this, and I think it's really important to have conversations, because we see this stuff so differently. I don't know how many people that are happy or indifferent about Charlie Kirk and say that's like, oh well, F around and find out, those people, if they actually consumed his content. I don't know. I don't think so, because he wasn't even particularly rude. I don't think he was as snarky as many others on the right. And, you take him out, well, who's going to replace him? Those people are disaffected now. Where are they going to go? They might go to someone who's more extreme, like a Nick Fuentes or something, who is more overtly racist and kind of like owns that, like proudly. The first only presidential rally I ever went to was for Tulsi Gabbard in 2020. And she opened it up by giving an Abraham Lincoln quote. "I don't like that man. I need to get to know him better." It's a great quote. Abraham Lincoln had another one, because the Civil War is divisive times, to say the least. He said, do I not destroy my enemy if I make my enemy my friend? No. So I want to have these conversations. I want to facilitate them. I want to bridge these gaps, find understanding, not agreement, understanding. I didn't agree with Charlie Kirk, but I understood him, and I valued him because of that. And everything about critical thinking, getting to the truth, happens in that tension, and we need to have it. I started a social media channel. I started this podcast because I wanted to get viewpoint diversity. That's what Cylinder Radio is all about. It's like different perspectives. And I think now is the time. We need to do this now. I would love to have conversations with you. I created a discussion community called the Patterdox Roundtable. Patterdox is my online education platform, Patterdox, dox meaning belief. And it's the belief in patterns, and pattern recognition is a great way to understand the world. And aside from my curriculum, I have the Patterdox Roundtable, which is a group of people from the left, from the right, all over, libertarian, all over the place, who come together with intellectual humility, like I have something to learn, genuine curiosity. Why do you think what you think, really? Asking questions, not rhetorical questions, real questions, but also grace, courteous goodwill. Like, you said this, but let me just not jump all over it. Let me try and understand more what you're saying here. And we've been having this conversation. We've had 2 since Charlie was killed, and they've been really, really productive, because we're across the board on how we valued him. And I would love to have you there. If you go to www.patterdox.com, patterdox.com/roundtable, you can join and come in and have conversations and share it with your friends and invite people. And it's a wonderful group. The people who don't want to engage, like in a good way, they end up leaving. I don't even kick them out. They just end up leaving, because like the rest of the group is like, no, that's not what we're here for. You want to just throw personal attacks and stuff, do that on Instagram. That's not what this is for. It's really, really awesome. I would love to have you join and be a part of that. This is kind of my take on everything going on, the divisiveness and some of the context. Highly recommend Amir Odom's video. He goes into a lot more details with better production quality and everything. But that's my take on this. And thank you so much for listening.